I was halfway through wrapping the second bottle of sparkling apple cider when my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it. Probably a Black Friday ad or another one of those family group chats where my messages went unseen. But when I saw the sender, my stomach dropped. It was my older brother, Chris. Just 5 words lit up the screen. Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. I blinked, reread it, and then read it again out loud, like maybe saying it would change what it meant. Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. I looked over at my son, Alex, who was taping handmade turkeys to the window, proud of his crooked scissor work. My daughter, Grace, was drawing little hearts on the paper leaves for our gratitude tree. And I just stood there, cider in hand, realizing we weren't welcome. I'm Noah, 38, divorced dad of 2. I work in IT, nothing flashy, but it pays the bills and lets me spend afternoons building Lego castles and pretending to be a dinosaur chef. My ex-wife lives a few states away and rarely calls, so it's just me and the kids most days. I don't complain. I like our little trio. We have our routines: Friday pancakes, movie nights on Tuesdays, and every Thanksgiving, we show up at Chris's house with pies from the bakery and a bottle of sparkling cider, because that's what my kids love. Chris is 5 years older than me, and ever since we were kids, he's been the golden boy. Straight A's, star athlete, married young, now runs his own contracting business. Our parents, especially Mom, treat him like he walks on water. Meanwhile, I was the artsy kid with messy handwriting who never quite fit in at family events. Over the years, I learned to keep my head down, contribute when asked, and never expect too much. But this was different. I sat down on the couch, heart thudding. No explanation. No sorry, it's a tight year. Or maybe we'll do something smaller. Just a flat-out rejection. And worse, when I scrolled up the text thread, I saw the message I'd sent him last week. Just sent the $3,000 for the caterer. Let me know if you need anything else. I stared at that text, sick rising in my throat. $3,000. Money I'd saved slowly over months, working overtime, skipping out on a weekend getaway with the kids, just so the family could have a smooth Thanksgiving. It wasn't a gift. It was my usual contribution. Every year, I cover the caterer. It started as a one-time thing when Chris's wife had surgery and couldn't cook, but somehow, it turned into tradition. No one ever asked me if I could afford it. They just expected it. And I didn't complain. Not when they gave me a folding chair instead of a seat at the main table. Not when my kids' names weren't on the place cards. Not even when Chris once introduced me to a guest as the family IT guy. But this time, something cracked. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that I'd just spent an hour helping Grace pick out her Thanksgiving dress from her toy chest, because she wanted to look fancy for the big dinner. Or maybe it was how casual Chris sounded, like I was just another RSVP to cross off the list. I texted back, "Is this a mistake? I already sent the money. The kids are excited." No reply. I waited, checking my phone every few minutes, then tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I messaged Mom, asking if she knew what was going on. She responded with, "It's probably just too crowded this year. Chris said the house will be full." I stared at her text in disbelief. Full. The man lives in a 6-bedroom house in the suburbs with a backyard the size of a football field. "We don't have room for you or your kids," he said. By bedtime, the kids were still bubbling with excitement. Alex asked if he could bring his robot dinosaur to show Uncle Chris. Grace was coloring place cards with everyone's names, including her own. I couldn't tell them yet. I couldn't stomach the look on their faces. So I tucked them in, made up a story about Thanksgiving dragons, and sat in the dark afterward, wondering how I was going to tell them the truth. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every slight, every insult that had been passed off as a joke. I thought about the time Mom told me I was lucky Chris even let me bring my kids, as if we were some kind of burden. Or the birthday dinner when Chris gave me a used toolbox and laughed. "Maybe now you can fix more than your broken life." Everyone laughed. I smiled through it. But something about this year, maybe because the kids were old enough now to notice, felt different. Alex would ask why we weren't going. Grace would be confused when no one showed up to eat her cupcakes. And I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to protect the people who didn't even bother protecting us. By sunrise, I'd made a decision. Not out of spite. Not even revenge. At least, not yet. Just a sense of clarity. A flicker of something in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. I made pancakes for the kids and told them we were going to have our own Thanksgiving this year. Just us three. Grace asked if it meant we weren't going to Uncle Chris's. I hesitated, then said, "Not this time." Alex frowned. "But we always go there." I looked at him, then at the pancakes, then out the window, where the paper turkeys fluttered in the morning breeze. "We're going to make new traditions," I said softly. "Ones that don't need anyone else's permission." I thought that would be the end of it. A quiet, sad Thanksgiving. Maybe a few awkward texts. I figured I'd swallow the loss of the $3,000, eat too much pie, and move on. But I was wrong. Because that morning, something else happened. Something I wasn't expecting. Something that would change the entire game. And it started with a message I got from my cousin Mia. She'd been helping Chris with setup the night before. She wasn't supposed to tell me anything. But what she saw, what she heard, it changed everything. And suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about a crowded table or a forgotten invitation. It was a setup, and it wasn't just about keeping us out. It was about using me. And when I pieced together what they really did with my money, I knew I couldn't let it slide. Not this time. Not ever again. That's when I got to work. The message from Mia came in at 7:42 a.m., just as I was rinsing batter off the whisk and helping Grace find the sprinkles for her pancake face art. At first, I thought it might be a happy Thanksgiving text or maybe even an apology, some distant family olive branch I wasn't expecting. But no, it started with, "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," and ended with, "They were literally laughing about how easy it was to get you to pay for everything." I stared at the screen, my hands still wet from the sink, water dripping onto the floor. I read it again, slower this time, the words sinking in like molasses. Laughing. Easy. Everything. I stepped out onto the porch, phone clenched in my hand, heart thudding so loud it drowned out the sound of cartoons coming from the living room. Mia had always been the outlier, my dad's niece, technically, though we were the same age and had always clicked more like friends than cousins. She was blunt in a way that often made people uncomfortable, but she had a sense of loyalty that ran deep when she cared. "I was in the kitchen last night helping Rachel plate the desserts," she wrote. "Your name came up. Chris said something like, 'At least the idiot finally came through on time this year.' Rachel laughed and said, 'Yeah, let's hope he doesn't show up and ruin the aesthetic.' Then your mom said, 'Well, I told him we don't have room, so if he still shows up, that's on him.'" I swallowed hard. The porch air was cold against my skin, but my face was burning. "It wasn't just them," Mia continued. "Everyone was in on it. Your dad said you should have paid more because your brats eat like linebackers." Even Aunt Lisa chimed in, joking about how Grace's drawings would clash with the table's cape. It was awful. "I'm so sorry, Noah. I didn't know how bad it was until I heard it myself." My stomach turned. I felt dizzy, like the ground had shifted beneath me. It wasn't just exclusion, it was humiliation. Planned. Discussed. Executed. I replied with a quick, "Thanks for telling me. Please don't say anything to them yet." Then I sat on the porch bench, staring at the phone, wondering how many times I'd excused their comments over the years. How many times I told myself I was imagining things, being too sensitive, reading into tones that weren't really there. But they'd been making fun of me behind my back. They didn't forget to invite me. They never intended to. The $3,000 wasn't a kind gesture they accepted with guilt or gratitude. It was a scam. I thought back to when Chris first hinted at needing help again this year. "Catering prices have gone up," he'd said on a call 2 months ago, sounding annoyed. "If you can cover it again, great. If not, I'll figure something out." "No, please. No, thank you." Just that casual pressure I'd grown used to. He even made a joke about how I was lucky I didn't have a real mortgage, since I rented an apartment. I had chuckled then. Chuckled. Like an idiot. I stood up and walked back inside. Grace had moved on from sprinkles to gummy bears, building a whole bear parade across her pancake. Alex was drawing a turkey wearing sunglasses. Just looking at them made my chest ache. They'd looked forward to Thanksgiving for weeks. It was one of the few times a year they got to be around cousins, sit at the kids' table with tiny paper hats, and show off their craft projects. And now, instead of explaining family betrayal, I was going to have to tell them their Thanksgiving had been hijacked by the very people they called aunt, uncle, and grandma. But not yet. I needed more information first. I pulled up my bank app and scrolled to the transaction. $3,000, Chris Henley. Memo, Thanksgiving catering. No refund. No pending return. Just clean, gone money. And I remembered now. He'd asked for it via direct transfer this time, not the usual PayPal or Venmo. They charge too many fees, he'd said. Just wire it straight to my account. I checked the timestamp. 2 weeks ago, right after my bonus hit. I'd thought about using that money to replace the kids' iPad or take them to a weekend amusement park, but I didn't. I prioritized family. Family. I shook my head. A few hours later, while the kids were watching a holiday movie, I went into my room and opened up my old desktop computer. I had one goal: find out exactly where that money went. Chris had said it was for catering, so I started digging. Mia had mentioned Rachel bragging about getting a deal on desserts, so I figured they must have used a local vendor. After about 30 minutes of some aggressive Google sleuthing and Facebook digging, I found it. A catering company tagged Rachel in a photo. A beautiful spread of roast turkey, cranberry brie bites, gold-accented pumpkin cupcakes, all laid out in a pristine dining room. The caption read, "Another wonderful Thanksgiving order set up. Thank you, Rachel and Chris, for supporting small business." The company was called Harvest Table Events. I clicked on their website. Their pricing was right there. The entire spread for 20 to 25 people cost $1,350. Delivery included. I sat back, stunned. Where was the rest of the money? Even if they tipped generously or added on a few extra sides, there was no way they'd spent more than $1,600 tops. So what did they do with the rest? I sent a polite message to the company, asking for a quote as if I were a new customer. I got a response within the hour. "Hi, Noah. For a full Thanksgiving catering package with all sides, appetizers, desserts, and delivery, you're looking at $1,250 to $1,450 depending on dietary needs. Let me know how many guests you're expecting." Confirmed. They pocketed the rest, and then told me I wasn't even invited. The fury that simmered in my chest all morning hit a boil. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being exploited. Used like a debit card with no feelings attached. And my kids? Casual collateral in their little performance of perfection. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through motions with the kids while every part of me felt like it was vibrating under the surface. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Chris's house and confront him in the driveway. But I didn't, because I knew that's what they'd expect. Noah always gets so emotional. Noah overreacts. No, not this time. This time, I'd do something different. That night, after I tucked the kids in and watched Alex fall asleep clutching the turkey he made at school, I opened my laptop again. I made a list of every family member who was there. I dug through social media posts, tagged photos, group messages, even old email chains from previous years. I noted names, addresses, any event planning details I could find. Because if they wanted to play this game, I could play too. The next day was Thanksgiving. I let the kids sleep in while I cooked. Turkey breasts instead of a whole bird. Mashed potatoes from scratch. Store-bought pie. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Grace wore her sparkly dress. Alex wore his official Thanksgiving dinosaur tamer t-shirt. We played board games and wrote what we were thankful for on sticky notes we hung on the wall. They never asked why we weren't at Uncle Chris's. Not once. Maybe they knew. Maybe they just sensed something. But I smiled, laughed, took photos, held it all together. And then, after dinner, while Grace dozed off on the couch and Alex watched a holiday cartoon, I finally opened the email Mia had sent me that morning. It was an audio file. "I didn't know if you'd want to hear it," her message said. "But I recorded this last night. Just in case." I plugged in my headphones. I heard laughter, glasses clinking, then Chris's voice. "I mean, it's almost sad, right? He still thinks he's part of this family." Laughter. Then Mom. "Well, we can't tell him he's not. That would just cause a scene. Easier to let him keep paying his way." Rachel. "Maybe next year we'll have him cover the Christmas gifts, too. He's already halfway there." Chris. "Guys never said no to anything. It's like training a dog. You give him scraps, he thinks he's getting steak." I sat there, completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just listened. And I made a new list. Not just names. Not just plans. But ideas. Ideas that would change everything. Because the party might have been over. But my part? It was just beginning. And the next time they heard from me, it wouldn't be an invitation. It would be a reckoning. The morning after Thanksgiving was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were still asleep, their cheeks pink from yesterday's sugar crash, the remnants of our little feast still sitting on the table. I hadn't touched the dishes. I hadn't even covered the pie. Everything felt frozen, like the world was holding its breath alongside me. I sat at the edge of the bed with the audio still playing in my head. Chris's voice so smug. Rachel's laugh. My mother's words, as cold and calculated as a frost-covered windshield. Easier to let him keep paying his way. It hit me all over again. The betrayal. The manipulation. Not just this year. Not just the money. It was years of playing the part they'd carved out for me. The helper. The backup. The good sport. The one who didn't cause trouble. The one they could laugh at, rely on, ignore, and still expect a check from at the end of the day. And I let them. I let them. That was the part that made my stomach churn the most. Because as much as they'd mistreated me, I had made it easy. I had trained them, just like Chris said, to see me as a doormat who wouldn't bite back. I had thought being the bigger person meant staying silent. That keeping the peace was the same as keeping my dignity. But that morning, sitting on the edge of the bed in a wrinkled t-shirt, I realized something else. I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel it without pushing it down. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. Tired eyes. Stubble that had gone from rugged to unkempt. A few gray hairs curling near my temples. I looked older than 38. Not because of the years, but because of what I'd carried. I brushed my teeth in silence, then went to the kitchen and started cleaning. Not because I had the energy, but because I needed something, anything, to ground me. I scrubbed every dish, wiped every counter, and took out the trash with a kind of robotic detachment. When I was done, I made coffee, sat down, and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. There it was. Still gone. $3,000. Vanished into a meal I wasn't invited to. I stared at the balance for a long time. Then I opened my budgeting spreadsheet, something I hadn't looked at in a while. I'd been coasting, getting by, earning enough to keep the lights on and the kids clothed, but never really moving forward. Never really building anything for myself. It wasn't because I couldn't. It was because I didn't think I deserved more. That realization hit me harder than Chris's betrayal. I thought about all the times I'd said no to opportunities at work because they meant less time to be the available family member. All the promotions I turned down. The freelance gigs I passed up. The weekends I spent fixing someone else's plumbing or assembling someone else's furniture, while my own dreams sat collecting dust. I'd been shrinking myself to fit inside a mold they never even thanked me for. So I opened another tab. Then another. I started listing the certifications I'd always meant to get. Things like AWS, CompTIA Security Plus, even some basic coding refreshers. I found an affordable bundle through a professional learning platform and signed up right then and there. $87.99 for lifetime access. My finger hovered over the confirm payment button, and for a moment, I hesitated. Then I clicked. That one click felt more empowering than anything I'd done in years. That day, I sat with a notebook and started sketching out something I hadn't dared to in a long time. A plan. Not a revenge plan. A life plan. Because before I could rise, I had to stop falling. I spent the next week rebuilding quietly. I woke up earlier. I shaved. I started working out. Not in some radical, life-changing way, but 15-minute routines I found online. Push-ups, jumping jacks, planks. I wanted to remind myself what it felt like to do hard things. To sweat on purpose. To push back against gravity instead of just surviving it. I got the kids on a better routine too. Homework before screens. Meals at the table, not in front of the TV. Grace started helping with dinner. Alex and I played chess again like we used to before bedtime. I also stopped answering family messages. Completely. I muted the group chat. Declined every call. Ignored the texts that came in after Thanksgiving, mostly passive-aggressive and vague. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving, Noah. We missed you. Mom said you were upset. Want to talk? Can you send over that spreadsheet you did last year for the Christmas fund? I read them. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. Then, one evening after the kids were in bed, I opened a file I hadn't touched in 2 years. It was a business plan. Back before Grace started school and I was still married, I had an idea for a small IT consultancy. Nothing huge, just helping small businesses with network setups, security compliance, cloud migration. I'd even designed a logo, set up a domain name, and gotten halfway through creating a basic website. Then life got messy. Divorce, custody schedules, burnout. But as I read through it now, something shifted in me. The idea was still good, and I wasn't the same man who'd given up on it. That weekend, while the kids were at a sleepover, I poured coffee, turned off my phone, and worked. I rebuilt the website. I refreshed the logo. I rewrote the service packages to be more scalable. I set up a business email and LinkedIn page. I registered a new LLC, one that didn't use the family name. I wanted this venture to be mine. By the end of Sunday night, I had 3 local small business leads, 2 of which came through a Facebook group I'd joined that afternoon. I offered discounted services in exchange for testimonials. Both bit. My first consultation was a week later. A dentist's office that needed better patient data encryption. I showed up in a pressed shirt, clean-shaven, with a digital presentation and a calm voice I didn't even know I had. They signed a contract on the spot. It wasn't a huge job, but it was mine. The check they handed me, $1,200 for 2 days of work, was the first money I'd earned outside of my day job in almost 5 years. When I deposited it, I sat in the car for 5 minutes and just breathed, not out of relief, but pride. Over the next month, I kept going. Slowly, quietly, more clients, more projects. I started carving out late-night hours to finish certifications, upgrading my systems, improving my pitch. I wasn't chasing overnight success. I was building something solid, brick by brick. And the more I built, the less I thought about Chris. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten. Because as I grew stronger, more grounded, more me, I started to see the bigger picture. I saw how often we're taught that family loyalty means silence. That blood demands sacrifice. That being a good son or brother means swallowing your pride and writing checks you can't afford. But I learned something else. You can love people and still walk away. You can set boundaries and still be kind. You can be the quiet one in the family and still roar when it matters. And as I kept climbing out of the hole they pushed me into, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just getting stronger. I was getting ready. Because while I rebuilt myself, the holidays were approaching. And I had a feeling they'd reach out again. They always did when it was convenient. But this time, I wouldn't be convenient. This time, I'd be ready. And when the moment came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd raise the stakes. It started with a Christmas card. Not the sentimental kind. Not even one signed with real ink. Just a glossy, mass-produced photo of Chris's family dressed in matching sweaters in front of their fireplace, sent through one of those online printing services with everyone's name pre-typed at the bottom. Wishing you joy, love, and family this season, the Henleys. I stood at the mailbox staring at it, half expecting it to burst into flames in my hands. There was no handwritten message, no apology, not even a hope you're doing well. Just that perfect picture, frozen in time. The Golden family posing like the rest of us didn't exist. And for a brief moment, I saw it for what it really was, not a greeting. A message, a statement. We're fine without you. I didn't slam the card down. I didn't rip it in half. Instead, I pinned it to the corkboard in my home office, right above my monitor. Not out of sentimentality, but as fuel. A reminder of what they saw when they looked at me. Disposable. Useful when convenient. Forgotten when not. That same night, I got an email from Mom. Subject line, Christmas dinner head count. The message was 3 lines long. Hi Noah. Just checking if you and the kids will be coming to Christmas dinner. Chris says the house will be full again, but maybe you can drop by for dessert if there's room. Let me know. Mom. I read it 5 times, just to let it sink in. No mention of Thanksgiving. No acknowledgement. No apology. And that's when it clicked for me. They still thought I was the same person. The same yes man. The same Noah who would smile through insults, bring dessert, and pretend not to notice there was never a seat at the adult table. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had changed. And now, I wasn't just rebuilding. I was planning. I knew that if I wanted this to end, really end, I couldn't just withdraw. I had to act. I had to show them, not with words, but with consequences. Not through confrontation, but through correction. And I had just the thing. Remember that $3,000 I wired Chris for the caterer? That wasn't just money. That was a business expense. At least, that's what Chris had written in a text, trying to justify it. You can consider it a donation to our hosting expenses. We treat it like a business event anyway. I'd save that text, along with dozens of others over the years, where Chris treated family functions like networking events, wrote off expenses under his business, and bragged about how his accountant knew how to keep things clean. So I started looking deeper. At first, I just poked around out of curiosity. But the more I searched, the more I found. Chris's company website listed clients that hadn't existed in years. One partner company had been dissolved in 2019, but still appeared on his homepage. Another listed address traced back to an abandoned lot 2 counties over. A few client testimonials were eerily vague. One used the same stock photo I'd seen on a different site. A reverse image search confirmed it. It was sloppy, really sloppy, and that's when the idea started to take shape. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront. I was going to expose. But carefully, legally, cleanly. First, I called Mia. She didn't answer on the first try. But when I texted her, "Need your help. It's about Chris and Thanksgiving," she replied almost instantly. We met up that weekend at a local diner, the kind with chipped mugs and burnt coffee. She looked nervous, like she thought I was about to explode. Instead, I laid out everything: the text, the audio she sent me, the catering invoice, the fake business reviews. I didn't ask her to do anything illegal. I just asked her to be a witness, to confirm the audio, if necessary, and to keep quiet, for now. She leaned back, arms crossed. "So what's the play here?" I told her the truth. I wanted to bring everything into the light, but not just out of spite. I wanted Chris to finally face consequences. Not just because he'd cut me out of Thanksgiving or laughed at my kids, but because this whole thing, the fake clients, the shady write-offs, the scams disguised as family, was bigger than a holiday dinner. It was a pattern, and people like that don't stop unless they're forced to. She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm in. What do you need?" I smiled. "A few memories. And your ears." Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered everything. Emails, screenshots, copies of wire transfers. Mia helped fill in gaps, timelines, event details, times when Chris asked family members to Venmo him money for business expenses tied to holiday parties or home renovations he never followed through on. She even remembered a time he claimed a cousin's graduation party as a corporate networking mixer. It was comical, if it weren't so grotesque. But the biggest piece came from a neighbor of his, a woman named Darlene, whose house I once helped wire for a new Wi-Fi setup after Chris bailed on her last minute. I remembered her mentioning that Chris had promised to build her a new porch for a friends and family discount. But when I brought it up again, she snorted. "You mean the porch he never built?" "Yeah. He took my $1,500 deposit and ghosted me. Said he was dealing with supply chain issues. Never returned my calls." I asked if she'd be willing to write a statement. She didn't even hesitate. By the time Christmas Eve rolled around, I had a PDF that was over 90 pages long. I called it Project Candlelight, named after the only Thanksgiving dish Grace had been able to make before we got uninvited. A little tray of tea-light candles she'd arranged with pine cones and cranberries. She was so proud of them, so excited to bring them to Uncle Chris's. She never got to. But now, Chris was going to get something else instead. Still, I knew I had to be smart. I wasn't out for jail time. I wasn't out for violence. I wanted exposure. I wanted accountability. And most of all, I wanted the truth in front of everyone who had played a part, even passively. So I waited until the perfect moment. Christmas dinner. They hadn't invited us formally, just the vague, "Maybe you can drop by for dessert if there's room." But this year, I planned ahead. I dressed the kids in nice sweaters, baked a batch of cookies with their help, and told them we were going to visit family for just a few minutes. Like trick-or-treating, but with pie, I said. They laughed. They didn't sense the storm underneath my smile. We drove up to Chris's house just as the sun was setting. The driveway was packed, the lights twinkling, the sounds of laughter spilling from the open windows. Grace clutched her tray of cookies like it was a crown jewel. Alex wore his reindeer hat, tilted sideways. We knocked. Rachel answered the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, Noah. Wow. We weren't sure you'd come by." I smiled. "Just wanted to say hi, drop off some treats." Behind her, I saw the whole crew. Mom, Dad, Aunt Lisa, Chris, standing by the fireplace, red wine in hand. The perfect little tableau. He looked over and raised an eyebrow. "Noah, hey, look who decided to join the party after all." I nodded. "Hope we're not interrupting." I could see him calculating something. His smile tightened. "Well, the kids can come in. Just be quick, okay? We're about to start gifts." I looked him dead in the eye. "Oh, I brought a gift." He blinked. "Huh." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Slim, clean, stapled. I held it out. "Merry Christmas, Chris." He took it cautiously, eyes flicking to Rachel, then back to me. He opened it slowly, brows furrowing as he flipped through the first few pages. He didn't make it to page 5 before the color started draining from his face. What is this?" Project Candlelight, I said. What the hell does that mean? It means I'm done being the one who cleans up after you. And I'm done paying for the privilege. I turned, ushered the kids back toward the door. As I stepped onto the porch, I looked back one last time. Everyone was watching. Mom, Dad, Aunt Lisa, Rachel. The room had gone quiet. Chris was still holding the envelope, hands trembling. I smiled gently. Good luck explaining all that, big brother. Then I closed the door behind me. I didn't hear from anyone for the rest of the night. But I didn't need to. Because that envelope? That was just the beginning. The police called me 3 days after Christmas. I was in the middle of helping Grace with her spelling homework when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a split second, my chest tightened. Old reflex. Old fear. The kind you get when you've spent years being the one blamed, the one expected to smooth things over. I answered anyway. Is this Noah Henley? The voice asked, professional, neutral. Yes. This is Officer Ramirez with the County Police Department. I'm calling regarding a report that was filed involving your brother, Christopher Henley. You're listed as a relevant party. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Grace looked up at me, pencil hovering over the page. Dad, I smiled at her, soft and steady. It's okay, sweetheart. Give me 5 minutes. I stepped into the hallway, closed the door, and leaned against the wall. This was it. I told the officer I was happy to cooperate. He explained that a complaint had been filed regarding possible financial fraud connected to Chris's contracting business. Multiple sources. Multiple inconsistencies. He didn't say who filed it, but I already knew. Project Candlelight hadn't been a threat. It had been a delivery. Here's what I hadn't told anyone yet. I didn't just hand Chris that envelope and walk away. 2 hours later, after the kids were asleep, I uploaded the same packet, every document, every audio file, every statement, to 3 places. First, the State Licensing Board for Contractors. Second, the IRS Whistleblower Portal. Third, a civil attorney who specialized in financial fraud and small business disputes, recommended by Darlene. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. I just sent the truth. And the truth did the rest. By New Year's Eve, Chris's contractor license was suspended pending investigation. That alone was enough to freeze multiple projects midstream. Clients started calling him. Angry. Confused. Some demanded refunds. Others threatened lawsuits. By January 3rd, the IRS had opened a formal inquiry into his business deductions. Apparently, writing off family events as corporate networking raised eyebrows when the guest list was made up entirely of relatives and neighbors. By January 10th, 3 people, including Darlene, had filed civil claims to recover deposits they'd paid for work that was never completed. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Chris panicked. That's when the texts started. First from Rachel. Noah, please. This has gone too far. Chris is under so much stress. The kids are scared. We can talk this out like adults. I didn't respond. Then Mom. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is tearing the family apart. Your father hasn't slept. Chris made mistakes. Yes, but this didn't need to become public. Still no response. Then Chris himself. At 2:14 a.m. You win. Okay, you win. Just tell me what you want. I stared at that message for a long time. Because that right there was the core of it. He thought this was a game. A negotiation. That if he finally acknowledged me, finally treated me like an equal, I'd back off and make it all go away. But this wasn't about winning. And it definitely wasn't about what I wanted. So for the first time in weeks, I replied, I don't want anything from you. I wanted the truth to be seen. That's already happened. He didn't respond after that. The fallout came fast. Chris's business collapsed within 2 months. Not because of me, because it was built on shortcuts and lies. Once scrutiny hit, it couldn't stand. His accountant dropped him. His insurance carrier canceled coverage. Projects dried up. The picture-perfect image he'd curated for years cracked, then shattered. Rachel took the kids and moved in with her sister temporarily. That temporary separation turned permanent by spring. Mom stopped calling me altogether. Dad tried once. Left a voicemail where he sounded older than I'd ever heard him. Tired. Regretful. He said, I didn't know it was that bad, which was a lie. He'd known. He just hadn't cared. I never called him back. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. The hardest part wasn't losing them. It was realizing I'd already lost them a long time ago. What surprised me most was what happened next. People started apologizing. Not Chris. Not Mom. But others. Aunt Lisa showed up at my door one afternoon with a box of old photos and tears in her eyes. She admitted she'd laughed along because it was easier than standing up. She said she was ashamed. Mia hugged me like she was afraid I'd disappear. I should have said something sooner, she whispered. Even my cousin Mark sent a message. I always thought you were just quiet. I didn't realize you were being pushed out. I accepted the apologies that felt sincere. I let the rest go. As for the $3,000, that came back to me in a way I didn't expect. Part of Chris's civil settlements included restitution to anyone who'd transferred money under false pretenses connected to business events. My name was on that list. A cashier's check arrived in the mail 6 months later. Full amount. No note. I deposited it the same day. Then I took the kids out for ice cream. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, but it became honest. My consultancy grew faster than I'd planned. Word-of-mouth referrals turned into steady contracts. By the end of the year, I left my day job and went full-time on my own. I moved us into a small house with a backyard big enough for Grace to plant flowers and Alex to set up his dinosaur obstacle course. We hosted Thanksgiving there last year. Just us. Plus Mia. Plus Darlene, who brought pie and laughed louder than anyone. The kids made place cards for every seat. No folding chairs. No hierarchy. Just warmth. After dinner, Alex asked me something I'll never forget. Dad, why don't we go to Uncle Chris's anymore? I thought about how to answer. About age-appropriate truths. About not poisoning them with bitterness. So I said this. Sometimes, people don't treat you the way they should. And when that happens, the strongest thing you can do is step away and build something better. Grace nodded like that made perfect sense. And it did. I don't know where Chris is now. Last I heard, he moved out of state and works for another contractor. Entry level. No management. No shortcuts. I don't wish him harm. But I don't miss him either. What I gained wasn't revenge in the loud, cinematic sense. It was peace. It was self-respect. It was the knowledge that my kids will never grow up thinking love is something you earn by being useful. And every year now, when Thanksgiving rolls around, I light 3 small candles on the table. One for me. One for Alex. One for Grace. Because that year, when they thought the party was over and the police were calling me, they were right about one thing. The party was over. Just not mine.